Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for
Hey.
joining and Lock and Learn number 10. Woohoo! With my friend Will Darden from Clearview. We're really excited to be here today to take a deep dive into a world that maybe not everyone wants to think about. And we're going to go specific in vacation rentals and property managers, right? But payment processing is something that, if you have a product and you have to take a payment, right? Something you got to think about.
Yeah.
So we'll introduce ourselves to you.
Yeah. My name is Will Darden. I've been in the industry about 7 years. I've had a lot of different roles. I worked for Vacasa for a number of years. I worked for V-Trips. I have done guest experience. I've done owner acquisitions. I've done revenue management. I've had my finger in a lot of pies. And
Some big names, right? We're throwing out on this
yeah,
at the
yeah.
beginning of
Like
this.
let me read my resume here to you. But um I I think that coming to a payment processor was really natural to me because, as you said, it's so foundational to how any business operates that it's gonna touch lots of areas of that business. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the word that keeps coming to mind for me is invasive. It-
Invasive, yes.
and I like that because I think you have somebody in guest experience that somebody runs into something with payment processing. Maybe it's a refund or a chargeback, and they go, "Oh man, I got to deal with the BlackBerry vines again," you know. And there is a way to make something positive about that.
It
Uh,
is, and I think that's the goal of what we're here for today, right? Is the education. And I want to point out a couple things that you just said, right? Chargebacks, right? I mean, these are things that make my like heart like just like stop for a second. Like, I've never had to deal with them, but as someone who's worked with thousands of property managers, where it was Verbo or some kind of software, revenue management out there, right? That call would come to us, and we didn't know what to do, right? And it truly was that we couldn't do anything. So now we're not, this is, over the past 12 years I've been in the industry, right? And where we're seeing is this question is still coming up. It's still here.
it is, and I think questions about things like chargebacks will absolutely be here till the end of time. Now, I say that as somebody who worked in tech before I was in this industry, and
Mm-hmm.
all of us at some point went, "Oh, I don't need an 8 GB iPhone."
Guess what we all have now.
There's always a limit to that, so nothing is forever. But I think the question for me becomes, how do I take what could be a very negative experience and turn it into something positive? How do those blackberry vines that are growing on the other side of my cyclone fence, how do I stop fighting them and start training them up on the fence so in August I'm getting free blackberries?
Yeah.
That's the big thing for me. And that to me is what I really want to teach people, because I believe that this industry is about education and support. And even if I'm part of a payment processor, my job as a salesperson is just to give information so people can make their own informed decision.
And prior to Will even becoming part of the Clearview team, I want all of our followers and listeners to know that he's been one of the people I've always called about questions when it came to this. So we're diving really in here. So let's take a step back for a second.
Yeah, yeah.
Define what is a payment processor in the vacation rental industry and why you need
Fair question. So a payment processor, and I hadn't really understood how complicated the back end is,
it.
because it's complicated. It is
Tech
not simply
complicated?
connecting.
No way.
Yeah, who knew? I'll send you a flow chart later. In fact, we talked about sending out a checklist for people to look over, maybe a flow chart of what are the pieces? What do the mechanics look like? I don't know if everybody's like me, but I like diving deep. So to me, a payment processor at the end of the day is really somebody who is going out and negotiating between your customer's bank and the business's bank to make sure that money gets transferred in a fast and secure way that protects both parties.
Mm-hmm.
and protects them from liability as well. You don't want your credit card number falling into wrong hands. You don't want your bank account falling into the wrong hands as a business owner. And so there's this whole process that we've developed to make sure that's protected from fraud, to make sure that both the business owner's funds and the customer's funds are protected. And so that's really what the role is to, in the same way that a channel manager or a PMS is negotiating all that information from all those different sources, the payment processor is doing the same thing, specifically with financial transactions.
Exactly. And if it's something that, if it's something, for if you're like, hey, I'm here because I'm trying to see different options of payment processes, right? The biggest one that everyone's going to know in the mind is Stripe, right? That's out there, and other ones that support larger businesses, right? But if you're someone that's like, man, I don't have a payment processor, I've been operating for a couple of years, probably because you're listing directly on OTAs and websites. So want to tell somebody that, right? If you're currently thinking about, and this is something I see a lot, Will, I think 50%. I told you this recently of my clients are people who haven't used the software before. And that's one thing in onboarding. It's like, oh, what's your payment process? And they're like, what? So being very open, because Airbnb, Vrbo has done it for them in the past. And that's something to be said, right? Is that safe and secure? Who's holding your money?
and not only is it safe and secure, but is it the most financially responsible decision? Because you are, with a closed audience, Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking, they can charge you what they want. And there isn't an option. When you have options, when you have an open market, as we like to talk about, suddenly you have the option of bringing in different items. And one thing that I advise customers when they're looking at us is you need to look at, you and I have known each other for quite some time. I am very definitely a tell me your pain, tell me where it hurts so I can help you fix it, even if that's not me, kind of salesperson. But to me, you need to think first about how it's affecting your business. And so here's kind of how I've broken it down, just top level.
That's what I was going to ask. Let's start with the flow. We're going to start with
the flow. Yeah.
Hurt. And then we're going to go in with the solutions. How do we do that?
Exactly. Yeah. What are those questions we're going to ask?
Yes.
Let me help you build a business case for yourself for how you approach this, deciding on if a payment processor or which payment processor. So the first thing you have to look at is there are operational concerns. This is things, it's going to affect how you charge guests. It's going to affect cash flow. It's going to affect how much you're paying for this service. And then there are experiential pieces. And those are really nuanced. When I was working for Vacasa and doing owner acquisitions, Vacasa has their management fee all in one. When I moved to VTrips pieced out, it had its management fee, but there were a bunch of other things that they added. It was two approaches to the same problem. And I, as a salesperson, had to shift from this is the right way to do it to this is the right way to do it. Those things, how you payment process and how you decide to cover that cost as a business owner, it impacts guests, it impacts owners, and it impacts your employees with what they're having to go through to manage. Now,
and that's been a big thing operationally for a long time that people said, even outside of payment processing, right? Like the fees. And I don't think anyone knows the right answer. And I'm going to ask you, like, what you think, but like having fees broken out versus putting them in. I didn't even realize how much that could impact how your payment process is going, how the statements, how everything's going to the owner, or your contracts in general, right? Because then now you have line items.
You have line items, you have ways that it affects your marketing for guests, you have guests calling your guest X team and asking questions or complaining. It absolutely can impact those things. And these are very broad, very high level answers.
And so you're saying, so basically, in some payment processes, right, the option of how you're operating your business, right? So if you like, you might have to change that depending on which one you choose.
And not only that, but I'm going to say the dirty word in our industry here, regulation,
Oh yeah.
because it's a cash flow thing. So you're touching, if you're in a state where trust accounting is required, that it impacts that. If you're not in a state that requires trust accounting, how are you handling it? Is your
Mm-hmm.
payment processor asking you to post pay? Hey, we got our money. We're going to pass some out. It's still going to affect accounting and bookkeeping. That's an employee experience thing with the nuance of that piece. The way it can play in on the publicly facing side for one of
Travelers,
the
guests, the
clients,
people
whether it's
bringing our
us
revenue.
or yeah. So let's say, and I see a lot of PMs that do this. They charge the payment processing back to their owners, and that is a viable solution,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't excuse you from thinking about the cost,
Mm-hmm.
because um, let's say you have a payment processor you like. You say the rate's fine, I'm not worried about it. I'm charging it back to the owner. Well, here's the problem. What happens when the owner gets an offer for a lower management fee from somewhere else? That becomes a churn issue. It becomes an owner retention issue. And so you
I mean,
have to
a lot of the things right now, what we have oversupply and little demand, and everyone's fighting over more inventory, and it's
100%.
only 1 to 2% mark that can make a huge difference. Which how much are payment processors on average? A couple percentage points.
Right. And this is, I think you have hit the nail on the head of why, when we were discussing this initially, I called out this name for this webinar is we live on thin margins.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference between the blackberries taking over your yard and having 4 gallons of frozen blackberries all winter is a very narrow margin, and it requires a little bit of work.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't, I think there's a lot of complacency in the industry. I see a lot of complacency in the industry for going, oh, it's fine. I can fix that with duct tape. I can put a band-aid on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not limited to payment processing, it's throughout the industry. We need to hold ourselves to a higher standard. We need to stop being 3 raccoons in a trench coat and start being professionals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We need to dress the part.
Yeah. And I've been saying this a lot. You know, I think I've said it here, and I've said it on almost every webinar, which was like about AI. But I think when it comes to AI, I'm talking technology. When it comes to what we're talking about with payment processing, we're talking about evolving to a different time. So all of this to be said that we are still very much a 50-50 place, right? And when do we get that a little bit more up where everyone's kind of saying, hey, this is the standard regulations, which all of us cannot stand. How do we create that standard of business for everyone, right? So be heavy, right? And trying to survive. That's kind of the title where we're going in here. So, you know, what other things should we hit on the mark that you should think about that could hurt you before we go to some solutions on there?
Yeah, I think places you need to be worried about are the regulatory side does play a role, because as we've gotten fee happy in the industry, people will charge it back to guests. Well, guess what? There are federal regulations that say, yeah, you can charge it, but you can't charge more than you're paying. And that's not an average. That is a per card.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would ask you, if you're somebody doing that, is how are you doing that? How are you determining, because the payment processor, the underwriter, the bank that's doing this transfer, they're charging you a different rate for a debit card that's tenths of a percent or hundredths of a percent than they are for an Amex, which could
Mm-hmm.
be 3 or 4%. So how are you determining before you do the transaction how
What the
much?
percentage is going to be, and for
I
each
can't
guest.
do that. Yeah, I can't do that.
It's almost like you have an average for each guest, which then puts you P&L later if you actually don't hit that number, because you can't say like I'm going to have only, you know, seven. Not only 10% are going to come from Amex, right?
Right. It is not realistically possible to do that. And I think some people have tried to get creative with it. I think charging an owner is one example of that. Booking fees are another example of that. But in much the same way that state insurance regulators are starting to look at these, these damage waivers and go, that looks an awful lot like a duck. I think it's a duck. And
That's
they're
not how you were
starting
gonna
to
go.
question that. I think increasingly, as technology enables enforcement better, we can't be complacent about that going, I'm small enough, it's not going to matter. Or I'm big enough that I can take the hit.
Hmm.
We need to operate at that more professional level.
And what technology is there out today, or how can you use technology today to help make sure that you are where do you get started, right? Okay, I
That's
get it. I know why I need to know this. I want to start knowing it. I want to get my ducks in a row.
so I think things like masterclass and expert are maybe a little overused in any industry these days, but I think personally, both as a salesperson, as a professional, and as a consumer, I like to rely on the person I'm talking to and vet them to make sure I feel comfortable with them. Because when it comes to a payment processor, it's not one and done. It's not sign up and you're gone.
No.
It's analogous to the guest experience. Your guest is coming in. Just because you sold the night doesn't mean your responsibility ends. You have to provide them with guest service. As a payment processor, I need to be supporting you in going through that process. If you have a chargeback, I should be supporting you through that process with the chargeback. You should be finding out about new regulations from your payment processor. In July, on July 1st, a consumer protection law went into effect in California.
Hmm.
And I don't know how much down the pipeline you've gone on this, but
I've
basically,
gotten so many questions on it to a point that
right?
it was one of those things where I thought I knew, and I was like, you know what? I'm glad I'm not an operator in California because I'm not sure.
Well, I had to go down the pipe with it so that I could understand it, but also know the limits of what I could advise my customers on.
Hmm.
And so we had to call our clients and say, this is changing. If you are, we offer two products. One that it's a traditional model where you're sending us the money after the transaction, but we do provide people with a compliant way to charge the
Hmm.
guest and or give them options to pay without paying a fee.
Hmm.
Uh,
And so so you're
we had
basically
to advise,
compliant for that area, right? You're like
this is
advisors
how
for
you have
that.
to be
Yeah.
compliant. Yeah. Here's how you have to present it according to California law in order to be considered compliant. One of our clients was on Escapia, and as you and I both know, Escapia goes, here's the rent plus taxes and fees. Well, that's out in California. You can't do that anymore. You have to bundle that. You have to bundle your cleaning fee. You have to bundle your
You just
booking fee,
bundle it all.
bundle your
Yeah.
credit card fee, and you can line item later. But the only thing that can fall under taxes and fees are
Hmm.
official governmental stuff now in California. And at
Now we
least
know.
and at least to my understanding, it's not just California businesses, it's California consumers. Now, I don't know how
Hmm.
they're going to enforce that, but you have to be aware of and careful of these things. And just like, you sign up with a franchise that's running that you're partnering with for your PM,
Hmm.
the vendors need to provide this expertise for you. Um, Getting to kind of the checklist stuff. We've talked about the areas, the general
Hmm.
things to look for why you should go, okay, I got to think about this. Um, when you are vetting a payment processor, and you really should have some kind of payment processor.
That's what I was about to go about when vetting, right?
Yeah. I I have watched owner operators go in and go, I'm just going to use Square or I'm going to use PayPal. And at their volume, it doesn't hurt them much because as we said, it's the difference is single digit percentage points.
And that's, we would say like for us, like at Hostiva, right, we're a PMS and we're a property manager, but we're very large. We use Stripe and Square. And I think the
Right.
reason I get a lot of questions from people and why we're here today is people who are, they're not very, it's not thousands of units, right? So where those margins really do make a huge difference.
Well, and so it boils down to three things for me: transparency, simplicity, and hospitality. Okay. It has to be like your payment processor. You have to trust them. You have to trust them to take care of you so you can take care of your clients, so you can take care of business. You have to be able to see things. And I have had clients come to us and say, I don't know what I'm paying for payment processing. Or they'll say, here's what my processor told me. And we'll take a look at their statements and there's a discrepancy. Now, did they not listen, or did they, and it was disclosed, or was it poorly communicated? I don't know. But I do know that's a shock when you're saying, yeah, my payment rate is 2.5%. And we look at statements and you're paying 4%. Well, when all these taxes and fees and these other things, and there are as many ways to do that as there are property managers in the U.S. And it is ever changing. So I like to look at it in terms of hospitality, transparency, and the third piece is simplicity. It affects your back end bookkeeping experience. And so just like a PMS has to work, like you've heard me talk about a PMS working like a set of glasses. It needs to be
put it on and work.
Put it on, it makes your life better. And what that looks like for an individual client could vary.
Absolutely.
And so making sure that it's simple, that it matches your solution, but is also making you stay ahead. I think
where we're saying, like, why we have these options out there and why we're here, right? Because I think that's a very good point to note, right? We're not in a hotel business. Hotels are different, and we're not selling just one gaming system. Like each property is different. Each manager is different. That's why we have options out here at Payment Processors, and why you should shop. And then talk to the people who are going to give you the information, right? I've always said, people ask me questions. Someone comes out of payment processor, like, I'll tell you what I know, right? But they're the ones who really know it.
Yeah. Ask to look back at our list. You want to look at those three things. You want to ask a really hard question that may not be easy to see. And I'll give some examples of what I mean by this. Is my payment processor really from the hospitality industry? I have nothing against the big players and my big competitors. I don't like to speak ill of people, and I won't, especially not on a recording. But there are some of these that are owned by larger corporations or backed by venture capital. And I think we have all seen what that has done, the damage that has done in our industry. So there is a difference to me between a product that is focused on our industry and a company that is bathed in and born of hospitality. Those are two very different things.
That makes sense.
What I would say is you need to make sure that you know who you're working with. Are you working with a hospitality focused company, or are you working with a hospitality focused product? Are you a very technical example of how this is done is in our industry, every transaction has a code for the type of product that is being sold. And when you set up a merchant account, you say, I'm this kind of business. The bulk of payment processors in our industry use a code that is not specifically focused on property management and real estate. And it is a generalized code. It's the code that Stripe tends to use. And they charge higher rates for it. Plain and
Mm-hmm.
simple.
Just even like,
Um,
and is that like kind of a problem of defining what we do is there's not exactly a definition?
well, it that is part of it.
Or there's a definition but not a name, right? Like, we're
There's
hospitality, but we skate. We're not hotels.
there's one piece of it that's the lack of definition, and one piece of it is the expertise. And so you want to find a payment processor that, as you're vetting their expertise, they know their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They know this business inside and out and can here's how you're going to perform. Here's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I know it's a hard thing sometimes. Be willing to give up your statements and say,
Mm-hmm.
here are my statements. I'd like you to take a look at these and tell me what I would have
Mm-hmm.
received, what I would have paid if I'd been under you. Best way to do that is just go to Stripe, or go to your Lynbrook portal, or go to your Ascent portal, or go to your Clearview portal and pull 12 months of statements and hand them off to that new processor and say, brass tacks,
Yeah.
show me. There's another piece to that expertise that I'm going to highlight here. I can't count the number of times that I've heard from people who are using Stripe or a PMS associated provider, without calling out any names,
Mm-hmm.
because it's anecdotal. I wouldn't feel fair saying something general with just anecdotal evidence. That's not.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up around scientists. Like, we don't.
Yes.
You need to make sure that they're doing underwriting. Much like insurance, payment processing is a legal agreement. It's a legal banking agreement that there's underwriting and an
Mm-hmm.
application process involved. I think in our industry, there's been a pull towards the big boys, Stripe, Square, PayPal, because, again, people go, this will work, not will it work
Mm-hmm.
best. And because those companies are not doing underwriting, and because others in the industry that might be associated specifically with a PMS are doing the same, you see major cash flow issues. So we're talking about 1 or 2 percentage points on the cost.
Mm-hmm.
I had a client I was working with who said that he signed up with a payment processor, and that payment processor held 10% of his volume for a rolling 90 days. So he got it. But if you think about how narrow our margin is,
Mm-hmm.
10% is a massive.
And that was going to be something I was
Gosh.
going to bring up, like, to end it with, because one thing, and we have about 2 minutes, we'll go over a little bit so we can end this on
Yeah.
here, right? But this is the number one thing that I hear. And I am not picking on anybody. I truly just want to understand, right? Constantly we'll talk to people, like, because, host Evo, PMS, we connect to Stripe, Square, and Clearview, right? And it could be, hey, we use Stripe, we don't like them, they held our money, right? I want to say that my husband also works for a PMS, and I know other people who work for PMSs, and I've called and I've asked, like, hey, I keep getting in this situation, so they want like a different payment processor, like something that's out there. And most times it's not. It has to do because they went through a huge cancellation time. Like, sometimes there is a back end thing that has to be looked at. So how do you know whether or not it's some operator error? Like, hey, I just need to go through the time, prove I am who I am. Like, the reason funds are being held is because cancellations happen in the area or something like that. Or it really is, I need to search for somebody new, because I never knew that was a thing until recently.
I think that's something that you can gather a panel. I think that tech,
Good panel.
yeah. I think that tech in our industry should be evaluated every year. If you're with how fast we're changing, if you're not looking at your PMS, your payment processor, your guest experience tech stack, how you operate, if you're not evaluating that and taking inventory every year, there's a problem. And I can't count any payment processor out there who wouldn't be willing to help you do an assessment of things.
Exactly.
And
Any,
here's the
every single
thing,
person.
if they're not willing to do an audit with you, that's a red flag for me. If they can't say, here's what we would have provided you under the same conditions and do apples to apples, how you're just going off of their trust.
Mm-hmm,
They
mm-hmm.
need to be able to see statements, and you need and if they're not asking for it, they're not going to be underwriting you. They're going to be doing what Stripe and Square and PayPal do, which is they're an aggregator. They go, oh, we'll figure it out on the back end. We're just going to charge you a flat rate. And that gets really sketchy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is a lot, right? I think we have a
It
lot of
is a lot, yeah.
information. That I mean, and this, the goal is kind of funny. Where I said like you're switching, like it's a serious subject, right? Taxes, payment processing, money.
Yeah.
Money is serious. Where your money comes from, how much you have, how you pay out your owners, making sure you're getting the value for the property. Like this is huge, and the way you're doing it means a lot, right? And so what we're going to do, I want Will to, send us off with some, the last thing that he wants anyone to know, but we are going to like pull together a checklist of this blog. And I really want to, number one, everyone who is watching this and has a question, go ask for an auditing review, right? If you're like, I don't even know where to start, like I've said this for times, your partner success managers, your client success managers are there for you, right? So don't think I don't have the time. Let me go back. Let me ask my accounting person to do the audit. Contact your payment processor. Contact your PMS. Like, how do people work through the things with you? But Will, what do you want to leave with everyone with today?
I think the core thing that I would leave is it is so easy to go, I don't want to worry about this. It is a tough thing to worry about. And it's in a different professional lifetime, I would work with consumers at Apple. And I would get these older folks in who would be scared to touch the computer they just bought because they were afraid they were going to break it. You're not going to break it. It is okay to ask some questions.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to not know the answers. And I'll hand you the phone numbers of two other payment processors to go talk to. And I would challenge people to go and do that to get a broad spectrum approach rather than don't just believe me. Make the decision to confront the hard reality that this is a fundamental part of your business.
Mm-hmm.
Do your due diligence as a business owner and ask a bunch of people and take responsibility for it by getting a reasonable foundation of knowledge about it and
Mm-hmm.
truly how it's affecting your business. That's what I would leave people with.
Yeah. I
I
love
don't.
that. I like to challenge people, and I'm the worst person. We're all this way. The things that seem are going to be so hard to me fall to the bottom of my list. When shockingly, if I actually sit there, do it, I go out, it may have not taken as much time and my anxiety goes down because then I've learned a new thing. So Will, if somebody wanted to contact you or Clearview and wanted to talk to you guys, what's your contact information?
Yeah. My contact information is Will D at clearviewmc.net, as in merchant consulting. We can, when we post the list and when we post this webinar, I can post a phone number. I'm head of sales over there. We've got a team of people that can go through and look at the specifics of your situation and find out what you're going through to try and understand better. Do we have a product, or is there a product out there on the market that could help you, whether it's from us or from one of the other processors, and really
Love
understand.
that.
Yeah.
That's great. Awesome. And everyone, if you need hold of me, I am not a expert in payment processing. I do text Will Darden very often and Jacob and many of the people from the team at Clearview. So they are amazing over there. But if you were, I work for a PMS, we connect with payment processors, right? So the common questions I hear, I'm happy to talk about anything. Clearly, I like to do that. But if you really want to get in touch with me, our email is wegotYou@hostiva.com. And thank you so much for joining us today, Will. And I hope everyone walks away saying that we got this. We got payment processing now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you for having me, Talia. This has been great.
Awesome. Have a great day.
Thank you.